Hello friends, Ian here, and wow, didn't know he was actually an agent of the CIA, like Jeffrey Epstein. Like holy shit, like I don't know, like the government even like they support him or actively support him throughout their trade deals or even like arms embargo. I don't know how deep this thing is. Like I thought he was just like regular businessman, who have unfortunately trafficked children, unfortunately, and maybe like eat them or something, because what's said on on some of the files in this case. So it's actually pretty dark and pretty deep too. So before I'm going to play this, friends, hopefully you can leave a subscribe to my video, because I am looking forward to having 500 subscribers. I'm actually looking forward for that, because I actually thought that you need 1000k subscribers to get like eligible for like YouTube and stuff. I want to like see and curious, maybe monetize some of my videos. But yeah, friends, hopefully you can support me, and thank you for all your support. So let's get right into the video.
It's 1983. The Cold War is little known. 30-year-old financier named Jeffrey Epstein has somehow managed to embed himself inside the largest arms deal in British history.
The biggest arms contract that Britain ever signed.
The intermediaries were demanding payments to be made into Swiss bank accounts. They were demanding flats. They were demanding girls.
Today, I'm going to show you the evidence that Epstein ran illegal arms deals and became an intelligence asset while committing some of history's most horrific sex crimes. Because in the early 1980s, Epstein is working for a man named...
It's so crazy like how deep all this thing goes. Like he is really powerful. Like I don't even know like how he even get to his position,
Douglas Leese, who's a wealthy, well-connected British defense contractor and arms dealer. At the time, the British government is in the middle of negotiating with Saudi Arabia the sale of nearly 100 of their advanced Tornado fighter jets, along with thousands of laser-guided missiles and precision bombs. A lot is at stake with the Al Yamama arms deal, because it's set to create 100,000 jobs in the UK, totally reshape the Middle East balance of power, and earn the British defense company BAE Systems $80 billion in revenue. But there's a giant problem. In Saudi Arabia, deals were decided by royal family members and princes, so if you wanted a deal done, you paid these guys enormous bribes. One man's corruption was another man's way of doing business. And that is where Jeffrey Epstein came into the picture. This language and cultural barrier required a new type of global fixer. He allegedly worked with Douglas Leese as one of the key people who helped design the financial structures that hid the bribe money. Douglas Leese was one of the men who allegedly bribed the Saudi family and British officials. He was widely believed to be an intelligence asset for MI6. According to accounts from Leese's son Julian and from Epstein's former business partner Stephen Hoffenberg, Leese mentored Epstein. This is where Epstein learned first how to create shell companies and smuggle weapons and move huge sums of money into offshore accounts. Later investigations by the United States and British government would reveal over $1 billion worth of off-the-books hidden commissions, bribes, and kickbacks, because Saudi Arabia had paid in a mix of oil shipments and cash. It all flowed through offshore accounts, intermediaries, and hidden financial structures that were designed to keep the real money trail invisible. Through Douglas Leese, Epstein was introduced to the highly profitable Cold War world of illegal...
Well, he's also part of the Nicaragua Contras?
Legal arms deals and financial networks that concealed them. Supporting evidence...
That is so crazy, like how deep all this thing goes. Like, I don't even like know like how deep like organizations, spying networks, and like all this like black market, like weapon deliveries and stuff, shit go really deep.
For Epstein's alleged involvement in this arms
very deep and dark
deal comes from the FBI's 2019 raid of his New York City apartment. In it, they confiscated a fake Austrian passport from the 1980s that showed...
I always kind of wonder like how, like what happened to like Epstein in his final days, like how did he get finally arrested in this case? Like it's crazy like how powerful he is, and like how like in deep and ingrained from the government. And I was kind of like weirded out like how finally he'd been got after all these years.
A younger Epstein under a totally different name. The entrance and exit stamps on the fake passport showed evidence that it was used in the early 1980s to travel between France, Spain, the United Kingdom, and Saudi Arabia. The most damning piece of evidence is that the times the passport was used to travel match with those that were used to facilitate the Al Yamama arms deal. Austria, especially Vienna, has been one of the world's biggest intelligence hubs since the Cold War. But where did Epstein get a fake fake Austrian passport from in the 1980s. Intelligence analyst Thomas Hampson said, quote, "I can't imagine Epstein getting a fake passport or using one without official government backing and cover. Intelligence services made counterfeit passports. In those days, some organized crime groups could have managed that as well, but it's unlikely that they were involved." Evidence that his close associate Douglas Leese was connected to intelligence agencies comes from a filing in U.S. courts years later that states, quote, "The nature and extent of Leese's activities and his various contacts around the world involve highly sensitive and confidential information, some of which are believed to be classified by the Department of Defense." Why would intelligence agencies create a passport for Epstein? To help him with this arms deal. MI6 and CIA wanted the arms deal to go through because it would help contain Soviet influence. It would give Saudi Arabia air dominance against Iran, and it would help stabilize.
It's kind of crazy, it's kind of crazy, friends, because the USA also supported our dictatorship here in the Philippines, but unfortunately, our economy here in the Philippines never recovered actually.
Global oil markets, keeping Saudi Arabia tightly tied to Western bloc of influence, which was critical. The arms deal would lock Saudi Arabia into the Western security ecosystem for many decades to come. Epstein appeared to be one of Douglas Leese's fixers on the ground inside Saudi Arabia, helping facilitate this arms deal. Diplomatic cables leaked years later would show that Epstein's close associate, Prince Andrew, criticized the corruption investigation into the Al Yamama arms deal. Prince Andrew tried to get any audit of the deal shut down while he was the UK's special representative for international trade and investments. Epstein functioned like he was a useful tool through which Douglas Leese could add one more layer of plausible deniability to his allegedly illegal dealings. But that doesn't even scratch the surface, because Epstein's about to get involved in Iran-Contra and become an intelligence asset. We'll analyze this with today's sponsor, Ground News. Here we see there's
I'm going to skip that, friends. Oops.
Cappy, or scan the QR code to get a better our shadowy world works. Douglas Leese became Epstein's first major client at his consulting firm called International Assets Group. It was Leese who introduced Epstein to Adnan Khashoggi, the billionaire Turkish-born Saudi arms dealer who stood at the center of the Al Yamama deal. By 1987, Epstein had become Khashoggi's personal money manager, giving him direct access to one of the most powerful weapons brokers on the planet. A source who spoke with journalist Vicky.
I always wonder, how does the Israel also being part of this? It's kind of crazy. I also heard a lot of Israelis are also part Epstein.
Confirmed that Khashoggi was one of Epstein's clients, and this connection opened the door to a much darker world. Khashoggi was the prototype of the modern black market arms broker, a man who knew how to move weapons, money, and influence across borders without leaving any fingerprints. And by the 1980s, that underground system had grown into a parallel global economy. United Nations investigations and data from the Small Arms Survey show that illicit arms trafficking was generating up to $10 billion a year during the late Cold War.
What? 10 billion? That's almost like a company right now. Or, yeah, I think almost like a American company.
Proxy wars in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East and Asia were fueled by this shadow network of dealers, financiers, and fixers operating.
It's kind of sad, man. A lot of Western allies, or in this case, trying to promote war with, especially from other countries, especially in Africa too. So it's kind of sad. A lot of them just support the other side just to, I guess, have a political footing within a country because of their resources. It's kind of
beyond.
I guess you kind of call it shadow colonialism. It's kind of interesting.
The reach of any single government. Weapons passed through shell companies in Panama and airlines that were fronts for intelligence agencies.
Also, I was also shocked about this, friends. I think Putin was also Putin from Russia was also connected to Jeffrey Epstein somehow too. That's actually crazy.
All to hide and obfuscate their true origin. This complicated network required global power brokers and middlemen to handle and manage it. There was nothing new about profiting from war, but for the first time in history, it had to be done in a way that gave global governments complete plausible deniability. This meant using middlemen with loose morals and allegiances like Khashoggi, Leese, and Epstein. At the same time, Khashoggi was one of the main brokers behind the Iran-Contra arms deal. Arranged through back channels inside the US government, the operation shipped more than
It's kind of funny because right now Iran is now the biggest enemy of the Western world.
2,000 TOW anti-tank missiles, around 500
never deal with with the friend that will eventually turn into an enemy someday.
Hawks
Never.
surface-to-air missiles, and roughly
I thought like the American already learned this lesson from the Afghanistan war.
200 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles to Iran, all in violation of US law. The deal was worth about $140 million in today's money, and that cash was routed through foreign accounts and offshore networks, then redirected to fund the Contra rebels fighting in Nicaragua. And according to Stephen Hoffenberg, he alleged that Jeffrey Epstein was part of the financial side of this weapons dealing system. He allegedly helped Khashoggi move, structure, and hide his commissions from these arms deals using shell companies and overseas accounts. This claim of Epstein's involvement in arms deals is also made by Ari Ben Menashe, who is a former Israeli intelligence officer who stated that Epstein was selling US weapon systems from Israel directly to Iran as part of another covert arms deal that was separate from Iran-Contra. But
that is very, very interesting, like how deep this goes.
Global black market arms sales rose to over $20 billion annually by the 1990s. During the peak Cold War years, covert arms pipelines supplied conflicts in Afghanistan, Angola, Lebanon, Cambodia, and Iran simultaneously, and that's just scratching the surface. And the world's governments looked the other way because it was...
Yeah, like how are they like not even like seeing this? Because they're actively like delivering weapons to their potentially, you know, enemies in the future, or like enemy states in this case. I don't know why they're even doing all of this trade for what, for money?
Useful to them. Epstein's business partner Khashoggi was a principal foreign agent of the United States. He established the intelligence partnership between multiple nations known as the Safari Club. The Safari Club was a covert alliance of intelligence services from Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, France, the United States, and Israel. It ran clandestine operations around Africa and the world during the 70s and early 80s. The Safari Club was one of the ways that the CIA supported arms deals and its proxy networks. Cartels, criminals, terrorists, and intelligence services used the same bank to launder their illicit funds for their operations, called the Bank Credit Commerce International.
But why is this the case though? Why they're actively supporting any type of like, you know, cartels or like criminals, gangs in this case, especially from like outside from the state? Like, it's kind of very interesting. Like, majority of these type of wars have been supported by these like dark companies or governments and stuff, like with, you know, black arms deals. It's kind of crazy like how deep this goes. But it's kind of weird too, like how much they are supporting a lot of, you know, they're getting a lot of money from giving a lot of weapons from other country who is at war, I guess.
It was in this shadowy world of arms deals, fraud, and offshore accounts that Epstein allegedly became an expert and made himself indispensable. According to the New York Times, Jeffrey Epstein rented a penthouse office at the Hotel St. Martin's on Central Park South with John Stanley Pottenberg. Pottenberg was a lawyer who had recently left a senior post in the Justice Department in the United States. Under the CIA's direction, Pottenberg then advised a banker from Iran on how to ship embargoed arms to Iran using fraudulent paperwork. They used overseas dummy companies, basically. But this was at the same time when he was working with Jeffrey Epstein on the so-called tax avoidance strategies. We know from later disclosures that British intelligence MI6 and the American CIA were deeply involved in these arms deals. Israeli intelligence helped the Iran-Contra deal go through, according to US government internal investigation documents. What all this means is that during this time, Epstein showed himself to be a reliable asset who had no morals, which is what these ruthless intelligence agencies look for. According to testimony given by Stephen Hoffenberg, a former close associate.
That's why I'm actually very grateful that he has been captured, you know, and I would love to like see what are the changes in the future of the governments in this case, especially from the American side or like even internationally, you know, like because this is very, very deep and dark. And I would love to see like how this will change in the future of how people were going to hopefully vote, you know, a better government or a better president, I guess in this case, to make some changes against all of these.
and business partner. Jeffrey Epstein was also helping Douglas Lease with the sale of Chinese weapons to Iran through the Chinese Communist state-owned defense company Norinco. We know that during the 1980s, China supplied HY-2 Silkworm anti-ship cruise missiles to Iran and signed weapons agreements worth over $4.8 billion with Iran. If Epstein was making millions of dollars in commissions from these arms deals and hiding this money, it would go a long way in explaining where his fortune came from. It didn't seem like he had any value system, really. He didn't operate in the interest of any one country during this time. He facilitated these deals to enrich himself and to gain further power and to make himself untouchable. It was Jeffrey Epstein who created the
And this really curious me, like how did he finally get arrested, you know?
financial network to enable these illicit arms deals to go through. This meant Epstein saw himself as outside the law, not accountable to anyone. And it was around this time in the mid-1980s
Now you may be outside of the law, but you know, the future still will catch up with you.
that Epstein started bragging to people close to him that he worked for intelligence agencies and that he was untouchable. Intelligence officers are someone who are directly trained, employed, and work for a country's interests. An intelligence agent, on the other hand, is the definition of someone who secretly works for an intelligence service by providing information or carrying out tasks under a handler's direction. Epstein was an asset, who's someone who provides value to an intelligence service with information, access, or services. That would have afforded Epstein incredible protection with authorities looking the other way at some of his horrific crimes that he's about to commit. Access agents are often people in high-end society, or people who have links to top scientific researchers, bankers, politicians, and cultural talents. Jeffrey surrounded himself by all of these. Thomas Hampson, an intelligence analyst, said, quote, "Consider
Yeah, and the future will always catch up when it comes to these type of criminals. You can never fight against the future.
this, Christopher Steele
You'll grow old and you're going to die. And the truth will always be revealed.
network of influential contacts, including high-level intelligence contacts, paled
It is kind of very interesting that you can never hide the truth. This is actually very fascinating, isn't it? Is it not? Like, because if you document everything, or once things are already known, you can't seem to hide it against like the people that it's always like going to be revealed someday. You know, in the future.
in comparison to Epstein's. If our FBI was willing to pay Steele $1 million,
Also, it does makes me wonder like why a lot of like, you know, Americans and agencies, why do they always like make a lot of documents just for them to just, you know, strike it out or just black out parts of the sentences of the, you know, the documents. I don't know why they even do that in the first place if they don't want to make it worse to begin with. It's actually very confusing for me why they even do that, but I guess it's good for, you know, historical ways for us to research.
imagine what they would be willing to pay Epstein to use his unique skills
Disgusting.
and extensive contacts on behalf of the United States. According to Ari Ben
Disgusting.
Menashe, a former Israeli intelligence officer, he made the shocking claim that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were running a honey trap operation to blackmail global elites for Mossad. Now, how would they have become involved in such an operation? Epstein met the Lease family right after he left Bear Stearns in New York City in 1981. According to a New York Times investigation, the two hit it off, and Douglas took an immediate liking to Epstein. These were the kind of people who sipped 20-year-old scotch while casually debating whether Aspen or Gstaad had the better snow that season. The two would later have a falling out, and Epstein would go on to publicly downplay and deny how close his relationship really was with him. But the 2026 Epstein file release tells a different story now. It reveals multiple emails in which Epstein discussed Lease, contacted his son Julian Lease directly, and stayed in touch with people in Lease's circle for years. Through Epstein's connections with Douglas Lease, he was introduced to Ghislaine Maxwell and met her father, Robert Maxwell.
I always love this, like, you know, cork boards. I think that's what they call cork boards, and they put like a lot of threads from images.
Maxwell is widely believed to have had contacts in the Mossad, MI6, and Soviet KGB intelligence agencies.
Ooh.
Another one of these high-level fixers for the very elite. After Robert Maxwell's mysterious death, his daughter became Epstein's second in command, essentially. The earliest known instance of them recruiting an underage girl was in 1994. At the same time, hidden surveillance cameras were installed throughout his properties. Sexual entrapment has been a standard intelligence tool for over a century. The Soviet system perfected this and called it compromat, or compromising material. The CIA
Ah, interesting. I didn't know like the Russians have this. I actually want to go back again.
Sexual entrapment has been a standard intelligence tool for over a century. The Soviet system perfected this and called it
So it is the Soviet system. It's actually very interesting.
compromat, or compromising material. The CIA conducted similar operations, drugging men with prostitutes to see what kind of drug and blackmail tactics would work best to extract confidential information in Operation Midnight Climax. Multiple
Midnight Climax. But it's actually very interesting, like the Russians like perfected this and shit.
victims testified that Epstein recruited underage girls and instructed them to bring friends, creating a recruitment
Yeah, this is actually how a lot of pedophiles also use their type of like influential power. Like they actually use other, underage people who don't even know much, and they actually try to, invite their friends to go in with them. It's actually very heartbreaking and sad, man. Like they try to, I guess it's like a way for them to capture a lot of these, underage women or men.
pipeline. Victims,
children.
including Virginia Guffrey, stated under oath that they were trafficked to wealthy and powerful men, including politicians, royalty, and businessmen. Several victims said Epstein kept records, photos, and personal details which they believed were used for control and intimidation. Then, in 2007, it appeared like Epstein was about to actually face accountability for his crimes for the first time. He's arrested in Florida and charged with soliciting prostitution with a minor. However, something shocking happens. He receives an insanely light slap on the wrist for his crimes. The trial resulted in the most lenient sentence that a serial sex
This actually is still very interesting, like how he really got, arrested finally.
criminal has ever received, just 18 months of work release. The prosecution entered into a secret non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. According to a Daily Beast article, Alex Acosta
But it's still very interesting, like he still got like in prison, so that's actually very fascinating. Like sometimes the American law can sometimes still get a person even though like how corrupt this is from the background. Hopefully they have like a very, very strong stance against corruption, because here in the Philippines, we probably don't have that, unfortunately.
Acosta, who was the former U.S. attorney who prosecuted the case, Acosta was later asked why this light plea deal happened. And he said, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and was above his pay grade and to back off." This statement was not on the record officially, and he would later deny in 2025 ever making it. Acosta lost his job as U.S. Secretary of Labor mainly because of the widespread criticism of how he handled Epstein's prosecution. If this sounds like a crazy conspiracy, it shouldn't, because it actually fits a long pattern in U.S. history, where people tied to intelligence operations are shielded from prosecution. Whitey Bulger was an FBI asset protected for decades despite committing murders and extortion. Barry Seal moved tons of cocaine for cartels while working with U.S. agencies and repeatedly avoided serious prison time. Mark Rich evaded prosecution for massive financial crimes and was ultimately pardoned by the president at the time because of his geopolitical connections. But another pattern, as we'll see, is that no one is able to outlive their usefulness, and when they become liabilities, they often end up dead or missing. Epstein's ties to intelligence communities continued after his prosecution even. Since 2003, Epstein had become close friends with Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel and former head of Israel's military intelligence directorate. The 2026 Epstein file dump revealed a confidential human source to the FBI, claiming
He called it file dump.
they had become convinced that Epstein was spying for the Mossad. However, tips to the FBI do not require any official proof, and notes on the file claim that the FBI did not independently verify the information. What we are left with then is evidence of Jeffrey Epstein donating money to various organizations in Israel. He also helped negotiate security agreements from Israel to West African nations. His connection with intelligence agencies around the world reveal a shocking look at how he operated outside the law. The ties also extend to Russian intelligence services. In a 2014 email exchange between Epstein and Sergei Belikov, Russia's Deputy Minister of Economic Development, Belikov was a trained FSB spy. Epstein emailed Belikov asking advice on how to deal with a Russian escort who was attempting to blackmail one of his business friends. Belikov said he'd look into the woman, and he writes back with a full dossier report on who she is, determining that she, quote, has no one behind her, meaning that she's not connected to anyone powerful in Russia. Epstein then writes himself a draft email on how he's going to respond to the woman, and he says he consulted some friends in the FSB who said that she would be considered an enemy of the people and dealt with extremely harshly if she she continued to threaten US businessmen and jeopardize potential investments in Russia's economy.
Ah, that's so interesting. They're also like protecting other types of like companies or investors from, foreigners, especially in America in this case, where the Americans, try to support like the Russians in this case. That's actually very fascinating. No wonder like some of the, Western allies in this case, like, especially when it comes to the war in Ukraine, they're still supporting Russia in a way.
Belikov helped Epstein secure visas to visit Russia and told him about his work in the Russian government. After essentially getting away with horrific sex crimes, Epstein became emboldened and started doing interviews with the press, claiming that he was influencing foreign affairs in multiple countries and that he'd made a fortune off arms deals and diamonds. In his last known interview with the New York Times reporter in 2018, he even said flat out that he had dirt on very powerful people. A year later, authorities claim that they found him dead in his prison cell in New York City. Out of the new 2026 Epstein files, we learned that Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers filed Freedom of Information Act requests to the National Security Agency and the CIA, asking for any proof that they might have that Epstein was an intelligence asset. They were searching for anything that they could use as proof to help them in their defense. And this is what the CIA sent in return to Epstein's attorneys. It says, "We search for CIA-originated responsive records that might reflect any open or otherwise acknowledged agency affiliation. With respect to responsive records that would reveal a classified connection to the CIA can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence."
Fuck you, CIA. What the fuck is this? You're fucking hiding something. Is your biggest asset. Like what are they hiding? What the fuck? They're lying. Holy shit.
Of records responsive to your request. Another attempt in 2014 reached a similar outcome. What the Epstein files ultimately showed us is that there is an entire hidden system that services the demand for illicit weapons and intelligence. It confirmed our worst suspicions that this system protects the powerful, no matter how destructive they might become. Check out this video on the history of US Black Ops.
That's a very amazing last final words from the video from Cappy Army, but yeah. It's unfortunate that majority of the systems have been made, especially in today's world, only supports not only to embolden the rich and powerful. And here in the Philippines, unfortunately, there's also like a lot of corruption here that's not even stamped by the government. There are some small improvement when it comes to like the public sector sometimes, like especially within my school. But yeah, majority of them not. It's usually when there's corruption, there's always like a way for black or dark stuff like this to propagate. So yeah, I guess that's the end of the video, friends. So it's actually very fascinating, man. Like I really learn a lot when it comes to like the histories of all of this. It's still kind of crazy like how he even like have this incredible power when it comes to like, the government. Also, motherfucker, man, like fuck the CIA. Holy shit, like they're probably hiding some things in this case. It's also kind of crazy like how the FBI in this case like finally like imprison I guess Jeffrey Epstein in this case and try to log all of the files that they have. And kind of sad like until it's been so long that they didn't release the files, and finally right now they finally release it and for the world to finally see it. But yeah, it's still kind of crazy. So what do you think about it, friends? It's like, wow, what do you think about our government right now? It's kind of sad because I think a lot of us people we take everything for granted, especially when it comes to like our freedom in today's world, that we're kind of a little bit ignorant too when it comes to like our government and ways for us to hopefully find a way for to have better protections or better control from power and I guess companies in this case. I would actually like some things to prefer to hopefully for companies and governments to not be interacting with each other, or they're always like separate from each other, like the same as like the church. Like the church shouldn't be part of the government and companies shouldn't be part of the government. The government is always for the people, by the people. So yeah, friends, thank you for watching this video, and good afternoon.